Expedition 33 may be many things, but it's not normal. It starts out in a weird world, a shattered world, where years ago a whirlwind broke the city apart and threw the absolutely massive human city into the center of the ocean. This was a cataclysm known as the Fracture, and that was 67 years ago. And since that initial destruction, every single year a countdown appears on a giant stone spire known as the Monolith in the center of the world. It's painted by a massive spectral-looking creature the inhabitants call the Paintress, and each year people have that 1 year to live their fullest or go on an expedition to try to kill the Paintress before they die. Yeah, it's that weird. So you have about a year, so you can grab your crap and try to go figure out a way to kick the shit out of a giant female version of Bob Ross with a homicidal streak, adventuring through the land that's filled with enemies known as the Neverons, and putting together the pieces of the story is what makes up Expedition 33. This comes out on the 24th for everything but the Switch, and it's also available on day one for Game Pass. After that initial story stretch, with some poignant moments that pop up, you go out into the game world and start exploring on Expedition 33. The game has an attribute system, which is easy enough to understand. You end up going up a level and you spend some points here or there where you have vitality, might, ability, defense, luck, and they all impact your health, attack, power, speed, defense, and critical hit accordingly. But it actually blossoms out when you start getting pictos. For example, marking shot means you have a chance of causing fire when you free aim at an enemy, or the ability dodger, which gives you a free action point if you perfectly dodge an incoming enemy attack. If you have one equipped though, and you end up battling it out with enemies enough times, that can actually become a passive that you can use and then switch out that weapon for something else. It can be a little confusing. You have 3 slots when it comes to your active pictos, but then when you move them over into the passive, you actually have a point system that is tracked separately, which I think might confuse some people, but overall it worked pretty well. It also offers a sense of exploration that I liked when it came to the skill system. They're pretty good. Each different character has skills that you buy, like 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 points. It just depends on which character it is, and some of the skills aren't the greatest. But when you merge those skills, many of them doing elemental points or directly reflecting the class of the character that you're going to be, does work well. It just takes a while to really come to grips with it. For example, the Fencer character, they have stances. You might have a special move you've attached to your character that causes good fire damage, and maybe you want to do that, but it'll switch you at the end of that move to a stance that causes a ton of physical damage on your next hit, but you'll lose all your defense. And of course, if you just got done doing that move, the enemy's going to be able to hit you at least once before you pull off your next move. For example, there's a character that has a spell that can give them 0 to 2 action points back. Made me actually plan, when I pull this off, what will happen if I get 0 extra action points? What'll happen if I get 1? What'll happen if I get 2? There's some complexity there. And by the way, those are 2 starting characters. There's a character you get later that is even more thrown on its head. And that continues when it comes to your magic casting character. This one's interesting. They cast spells and they gain stains on themselves. Think elemental buildup. But if you cast a fire spell, there's a very high chance it's going to actually add a stain of ice to you, or something that seems almost opposite. Sounds a little bit odd, and it is odd at first, but once I sort of grasped the fiction of it and the idea, I did like that. It feels cool, and it certainly does feel like something different. And of course, you probably saw this, but there are QTE events, and those occur pretty much everywhere throughout the game whenever a skill is used against you or from you. So the aforementioned fire skill may have you hitting the spacebar twice at different times. You time it perfectly, you get more damage or some other bonus. The same thing happens when it's the enemy's turn and they're attacking you. The spacebar allows for you to jump over ground attacks, and the Q and the E are your parry and dodge. Dodge has a larger window of opportunity, so I suggest you start using that at first to sort of figure it out. And the space is really only needed if they attack the ground. When it comes to the parry, though, if you parry perfectly, and if it's not a combo, you'll instantly end up doing a bunch of damage to the enemies. If it's a combo, a lot of times they will do 3 or 4 hits, and you have to parry each one successfully to finally perform a hit back on those enemies. Those do an insane amount of damage, but it does offer the dichotomy that I think you'll notice right away when you're playing Expedition 33. At times, mixing all this together sounds great on paper, but it can feel oddly disjointed, going from this turn-based, everything being super strategic, to then instantly having to smash the spacebar, then fighting enemies that you don't even know what their tactics are. Sometimes I felt that the dodge was a wide window and really just needed to be hit as long as the enemy was in maybe the second half of their attack. Where at other times, even with just the dodge button, I felt like the requirement to hit that was super tight. This is on any difficulty, easy, normal, or hard. When you jump into the options, you can turn off QTE events, but oddly enough, it only turns off the ones you do, meaning you are still required to hit the perfect parries or dodges. Also later on in the combat, which I'll talk about in a bit, that can get quite difficult because of the way the enemies look, the way they animate, and just how much is going on screen. Regardless of that, most of the time you win the battle, and when you do, you get some loot. You can also see who did the most damage and how many perfect parries you had and that kind of thing. When you go to camp, you can spend the XP, you can go up in levels by those skills and talk to the characters. When it comes to the graphics and seeing everything and how all this comes together, in Expedition, at first at least, things are almost vaguely incoherent. It's a mix of world police style characters with their looks, with super thin bodies and slightly over the top overdone heads, like bobbleheads, always on the risk of tripping and falling over. But it's the locations, especially as you continue through the middle to end game, that do offer a profoundly colorful mix of environments. And it's that interaction of the characters with those environments during battle that highlights some of the best moments of Expedition 33. For example, two armed, double-shielded rock leviathans leap into the air like Stonehenge trying to get revenge back on those people who sprayed graffiti on it. Characters leap into battle, spin around, they perform counters all at different times, or when it's the ground attack at the same time, and it looks like an anime. Those parts also forcibly reminded me of Final Fantasy and other high fantasy turn-based games. I really did like that. Moving around the game world itself, though, especially the game's open map, is pretty trivial. You run across the different locations, you can see enemies here or there, and you can see bits of camps destroyed and some history elements all spread around. You can sometimes find information about other expeditions as you explore and who have come before you and been squashed and absolutely demolished by whatever it is that lives in this colorful land. And that does add a sense of discovery, a sense of wonder to it that I ended up feeling throughout the game, consistently looking around, trying to find little secrets in the main map or in the overworld map. I like that. Luckily, it also performs very well. From the 2080 up, it performed well, 2K, 4K, it just depended on what settings. It was also very smooth with or without DLSS on the 3080 and above, which was surprising to me, depending, of course, on resolution. With the 3080 and the 4090, I was always above 100 FPS at 4K, and then with the 2080, I had to do some adjustments here or there. Now, only in the busier sections do you run into frame drops or the occasional load stutter, but it was pretty rare. Overall, though, I would say this. Expedition 33 looks like pretty much no other game. It plays like pretty much no other game, or at least many games combined together, and the two ended up paying off. What also pays off is the voice and who they got for all this. Andy Serkis is in here, that's right, Gollum, but actually the good Gollum, not the video game version. You have Charlie Cox from Daredevil. Each one of them presents unique characters. You have Kirsty Ryder, Jennifer English, and many, many others. They do a very good job with the voices, though I didn't necessarily love the way they were delivered. A lot of times you're hitting the F button to go from sentence to sentence to sentence, which fundamentally felt a bit flawed. Also, the music in Expedition 33, straight up, I said this in the preview, it's some of the best music I've heard not only this year, but in many years. For example, you notice cello when Gustav is relaxing or exploring. Every character has their own themes, as do a lot of the locations and enemies. The game's singer and composer went out of her way to make sure that the lead vocals on almost everything has a constant feel to it that continually seems to blanket the open world and the game world. It's timely when it hits, and the presentation here, when combined with the visuals, is fantastic. And no matter what, even in the most dire at times, the game has this feeling of wonder and a sense of exploration in the music that encapsulates almost everything that we would want in a title like this, never getting in the way, almost always creating these little earworms that I would catch myself humming later on, even while not playing. When it comes to the sound, this is pretty good. Expedition 33, I would say, delivers poignantly on what it needs to, and then in some other places doesn't really hit as well as it should. For example, running around sounds like your feet are wrapped in socks and cottage cheese. And I would like to have seen a little bit more work done on some of the more mundane sounds, like running around, because it's one of the sounds you're going to hear the most, and here you necessarily don't want to. When all this comes together, though, especially the QTE system, the battle, the wonky-ass story, is it fun? What I can say about Expedition is it is a unique game, many times quite enjoyable, not so much in the exploration or running around, which are somewhat bog standard, even with the overland map. But once you jump into battle, identifying which build you're going to use and how you're going to go about using them, counting out action points, figuring out ways to get just a little bit more from a character and get that super powerful move pulled off. I just really wish the complexity made a bit more sense, because sometimes a character feels like the almost reverse, and fictionally it might make sense in this world. I would say it does make sense without spoilers. As a whole, it can be confusing for that first-time player, and that's sort of why you're here, hopefully. Also, it can be weird inside the camp. Like I said before, there are places and things that you just can't do that I think a lot of people who've played games like this will be like, well, why can't I switch this when I'm here? Why do I have to go back here to do that? And it can just feel odd. Regardless of that, I found myself consistently playing. The mystery of the story was probably the main part, which is not something that actually occurs with me very often. A lot of times I feel like these are clumsy. The QTE system is odd because you can't turn it all the way off. What you can turn off is probably the part that you don't give a crap about turning off. And when it comes down to it, the animations and the tightness and the variation between enemies, especially when you get 4 or 5 different enemy types or you get a boss in this game, you can end up pulling a boss and a fight that really does feel like if you miss one QTE that you haven't really learned because this is the first time fighting the enemy, could end up resulting in a full team wipe, which did happen to me a couple times regardless of the difficulty. That was bothersome. Suddenly, it felt like everybody was so goddamn difficult. It was like the Hulk facing off against Thanos, a guy who can smash, pull, and tear apart almost everybody, and suddenly you're getting the shit kicked out of you by some purple dude with a ballsack chin. That is exactly how I felt in this game. Did I turn it off? No, I did not. I continued through it, but I do wish that was tightened a great deal. As you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, deep sale, or never touch. There is a lot here that I think establishes Expedition 33 as something special. But special doesn't always mean smooth. It's a game of mystery that seems translated through another mystery. Anyway, that's it for me. Check out the Patreon. Absolutely would help. You know this is a channel. We don't do sponsored stuff at all. We don't go on trips to Disneyland. So it's just me and you. And if you want to jump in with me, you, and some other people, you can join the Discord where we sit down, we stream games, we hang out, we do all kinds of special behind-the-scenes stuff. Right now, everybody's streaming Oblivion in my Discord, so I'm going to go back and check that out with them. The Oblivion Remastered looks pretty good so far. Anyway, that's it for me. Check out, follow me on Twitter. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Wanna go for a ride? Apparently, that was where people went on dates, you know? What do you think happened in those cabins?
No, actually, my guess is this was Expedition 50. I guess.
Thunder.
These things are fascinating.